Indeed, Catherine. 4 minutes past 9 on BBC WM. Time for the first part of this week's Hard Talk. Nikki Sinclaire, one of our MEPs here in the West Midlands, I think it's fair to say she's one of the more colourful characters to have headed through the doors at Westminster and now, of course, the European Parliament. She famously lost the whip of the UK Independence Party, UKIP, after falling out with her former colleagues, and she now sits as an independent in the European Parliament in Strasbourg. The politician is openly lesbian, also won a claim for sex discrimination against UKIP in 2010. Nikki Sinclaire, the subject of this week's Hard Talk with Steve Dyson.
Hard Talk with Steve Dyson on BBC WM.
Welcome to Hard Talk with Steve Dyson. Joining me today is Nikki Sinclaire, the independent MEP for the West Midlands. Hello to you, Nikki.
Hello.
Nikki, where are you from originally, and why did you end up here in the West Midlands?
Oh, a bit of a long story. I was born in London, actually St Thomas's opposite the House of Parliament. Grew up in London, moved around quite a lot, 13 schools. My father was a mixture between a HGV driver and a fish and chip shop manager, so it was a bit of mixture there. But I was working in the States for 2 years for a Congresswoman campaign and also for Arnold Schwarzenegger campaign when he became Governor of California.
Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yes, yeah. I worked on the recalls. He was elected as a governor via a recall, which is a fantastic procedure. They have to sack their incumbents in America. I think we should have that here in this country. And I was obviously involved with UKIP for a number of years at that point, and very friendly with Mike Nattrass, obviously from the West Midlands. And when he was elected in 2004, he invited me back to become his political advisor. So I moved to Halesowen originally, and from 2007 I live in Solihull.
You talked about your openly gay life. Yeah. You've got no shame in being a lesbian. In fact, in 2004, you outed yourself in lesbian in a paper.
I was out before that.
Okay, well, officially outed yourself,
okay.
Or certainly historically or in the media. And in 2005, you were even arrested after protesting at a gay Question Time event, I seem to remember.
You were the editor of the paper.
I certainly was, editor of the Birmingham Mail at the time. Do you think you caught controversy by being so openly gay?
No, it's because... No, I've never used my sexuality in my career. If I wanted to be a career politician, I wouldn't have joined UKIP when I did in 94. You know, no one could have foreseen UKIP having elected people. So I've not joined for a career. And had I wanted just a career in politics and used my sexuality, I think a career in some other parties would have probably pushed me further along the scale, and I could have used it positive. But I've never used it. That instance in 2005 is they were having hustings in the general election, and I sincerely felt that UKIP got a bad press in the gay community, and I just wanted to go there and put the arguments. UKIP had finished third in the European elections the year before, and I thought UKIP deserved to be at that table explaining why that people should vote UKIP in that general election. It wasn't just they just wanted UKIP, they then told the press that they couldn't report on that particular thing. I mean, freedom of the press, a general election, as I remember the editorial, I think you actually said, elections are for politicians to make their case.
Nikki, you claimed at one stage that UKIP had discriminated against you because you were a lesbian, and in fact, you won your claim at an industrial tribunal about that, and it's an employment tribunal. Tell us about that.
That was obviously recently. We're talking about. I actually won it on technicalities. They didn't put in a defence, and there's been negotiations since, but the claim is based basically on I felt that I had been removed from UKIP after I resigned from the EFD, and that there were then two other UKIP MEPs resigning from the EFD, including Mike Nattrass here in the West Midlands, and they hadn't been removed. And you think, well, why is that? There are other examples of comments in the party by other MEPs.
Well, I want to ask about that, actually, because we'll talk about the actual relationship you've got with UKIP a little bit later. But in terms of your sexuality, do you think that UKIP are homophobic?
Ordinary members, generally not. I haven't had a problem. The selection list, or because the European elections done on a proportional representation on a list system, you have to put a list of candidates. UKIP select that by an internal election in the West Midlands. Now, UKIP members put me in as number 2, which is where I actually think I deserve to be after Mike Nattrass, obviously. So I don't think UKIP members are homophobic, because it obviously wasn't an issue.
But someone is within the UKIP party.
There are people, and I would say there are homophobic people in the Labour Party, Conservative and Liberal Democrats. Yes.
What kind of homophobia have you had to face, and how have you dealt with it?
With those things like racism, it might not necessarily be direct. It's comments, isn't it?
What kind of comments have you had?
Well, it's not maybe even direct to me. I remember at one of the election rallies, I think it was in Exeter, and Godfrey Bloom, who's on the Women's Committee, talked about in the Parliament, talked about the Women's Committee, and said, all those women, they don't like me very much. They're very cliquey. They're very stuck together in more ways than one, if you catch my drift.
Right.
Yeah, and I find that really offensive. To say that that the reason why they don't like him is because he's a man and they're all lesbian or something. Just because they have points of view. And as a gay person, that probably doesn't make you feel about.
I mean, obviously, as someone who has to face those matters within politics, you have an understanding of the wider issues of homophobia within society and the wider issues that gays and lesbians face. What's your feeling about British society and the way that that's developed or not?
Well, first of all, I'd like to answer it in 2 ways. First of all, as a politician, my experiences. You might not like this, but the biggest people that I seem to have a problem with homophobia in society is journalists. I was out in my campaign vehicle in Shrewsbury. Not one person asked me about my sexuality. I've not received one letter, one phone call in a couple of years. And yet nearly every journalist wants to ask about it. There's an article in the Birmingham Post, and 2/3 about it mentions my sexuality, but it doesn't mention the actual work I'm doing. And you think, come on, I'm here not because of my sexuality. I haven't campaigned on my sexuality.
Of course, when we are asking about your work and we're asking about your views, and we've done a lot of that, I suppose what I'm asking you about, because it has been in the media, I'm asking how you cope with it, really, and how as an outwardly announced lesbian, how you cope with people talking about it and making you feel different.
Well, I don't think I do. I don't think it becomes an issue really in my work. I really don't. I really just focus on what I have to do, and my sexuality really doesn't come into it. I don't think it affects the way I think about the job. I move forward focused on what I was elected to do, which has nothing to do with my sexuality. It's focused on getting Britain out of the European Union. Yes, there's homophobia, but that's their discrimination. People have discrimination against women. People have discrimination against men. People have discrimination because you're black, yellow, whatever, and that's their problem. Yeah, and part of letting them succeed is letting it get to you. But my moving forward, as it goes back to that thing, you can sit down, feel sorry for yourself, or you can move on. And that choice is yours, not that person's.
Must hurt sometimes. I'll give you an example. I mean, you know me, Nikki. I'm a big lad. I'm 6'2".
Yeah.
I'm 17 stone, for God's sake.
Right.
And I get comments about my size. You're taller than me, Nikki.
Yeah.
You're not as heavy, but you're taller. And I've heard in the media and sometimes on websites some really cruel taunts. I mean, you've been called a transsexual at times. I mean, that kind of thing must really hurt you.
Look, I'm focused on my job. Okay, what people say, whether they're right, they're wrong, or whatever, and it's an irrelevance. It really is an irrelevance. What did people elect me to do? Is that more important than actually, local services being cut when we're giving £48 million a day to the European Union? Of course not. People do not care about that. People care about being represented, about getting value for money, and that's what I'm concentrating on.
One last question about it: the wider homophobia that there is in some parts of society. What's your message to people who do suffer from that and who do find that hard? You talk very strongly about your own opinions and about how you've got to focus on politics and a focus on your career, and sticks and stones don't hurt you. But how would you encourage people who are hurt by this?
Yeah, and I don't take that lightly, and I understand that I'm very lucky that obviously I have this inner core that's very strong and can fight back, and I totally understand. And I've had constituents write to me and saying that they suffered with homophobia, etc. And I didn't really answer your question about homophobia in Britain. And there's actually been, I would think that Britain's more a tolerant society in 2011 than it was when I was growing up in the 1980s. But there's been a recent increase in homophobic attacks and murders. It's very hard to comprehend in this day and age. And it's sad. I've been very lucky I've not been a victim of
No, but what's
violence.
your advice to others and your...
My advice to others is look out for support groups. Get support. build confidence, and it's what I feel a bit uncomfortable saying, because I don't want to patronise anyone, and it's very easy to say, be strong, be proud. But, not everyone's like that. Gain friendships, discuss your problems. Feel proud, there's nothing wrong with you. The problems with other people, there's nothing wrong with you. But keep safe, don't necessarily flaunt it, because, not that if you want to flaunt it, but if you don't flaunt it for the sake of flaunting it, if that makes sense.
Don't get yourself into trouble.
Don't get yourself in trouble, even I've just said that, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that could be portrayed in a certain way as, you keep it. And I'm not saying that, I'm just saying this, look, be careful. I know not to wave around the gay flag in certain areas that I know I'd probably get myself into trouble, so I'm not going to go and do it. It's not because I'm not proud of being gay, it's just that you have to look after you.